You're looking right around $30.
Did you hear that?
Right around $30.
Okay. For a single.
For a single bulb, exactly correct.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the next thing that we want to talk about tonight is air. Air movement, air circulation, air, how it affects transpiration, where it goes into the plant, all of these good things. So first of all, air, what is it? Obviously, air is just a combination of gases that is in our environment, a mixture of methane, carbon dioxide, oxygen, hydrogen, all of these things make our air that we breathe. As far as plants are concerned, they primarily deal with CO2. They typically breathe in carbon dioxide, which, what we've talked about before, is what brings on their photosynthesis, brings on their production of cells and of chloroplasts. Why is it important, air in particular, with our plants in our garden? I've had many a customer who have a beautiful garden in a beautiful space with good equipment and good plant stock, but because they did not have air circulation, ultimately their gardens would stagnate. And as a for instance, you have 6 beautiful tomato plants under the proper amount of lights, right fertilizers, but since you're gone most of the time, they're in this room that you keep the door closed. So ultimately, they use all of the CO2 gas within the area, and it's depleted of the gas that they need to breathe. They then exhaust oxygen. So now the room is doubly rich with oxygen, which effectively works as a stifling force for them. If my hand is a plant, and it's in a closed room, eventually just above the plant will be a layer of oxygen. And that layer of oxygen will sit on the plants as effectively as a hefty bag. And it will keep any other gases from getting to them. And it will keep the plants from growing. Will it kill them? No. But you'll notice, whereas they were growing and getting larger and producing more, that they've seemed to come to a standstill. And that's typically a sign of stagnation due to no circulation or no gas exchange, no air exchange. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is how the plants are doing this and when they're doing those processes. We've kind of touched on it before. With the lights on, typically plants are absorbing gases throughout the day, whatever that day may be. With the light exposure, they're absorbing. And what does that mean? That means that on the leaves, on the bottom sides and top sides, you have small openings or orifices called stomata. And these stomata are effectively the mouth and lungs of the plant. It's just a little tiny puckering little mouth that allows gases to come in and out, and when it closes it stores them within the leaf for absorption into the plant. So during the day, typically you're seeing CO2 going into the plant. At night, you're typically seeing oxygen come out of the plant. And this is all regulated by the stoma or stomata. And some things will factor into that. So for instance, I've seen gardens that are very windy with a lot of fan movement. And they say, well, I have to use this much fan because it's so hot in here, Ted. The downside to that is every time that you blow across those leaves, the little mouths pucker in response. The stomata close in response to that air movement. So you could actually be stifling the garden growth as a result by having too much or too aggressive wind circulation throughout the plants. Air movement is very key within a garden. Typically, I recommend quite a bit of fans in any one garden room. In a perfect world, in a perfect gardening environment, your garden would have 5 fans. 5 for one room. And those fans would include a mover fan to move the leaves, offering wind resistance and strength training, offering a circulation of gases to ensure that they get CO2, not just oxygen, or that hot gases are moved away from them. You would have an intake for fresh air. You would have a hot air exhaust to remove used air or hot air from the top of the ceiling. You would typically have the same on your lights. You can see how these lights are plumbed together. Typically you would force feed one fan pushing cold air in from outside of the room and one fan extracting hot air from the lights. And what that ultimately would do is keep the light heat from transmitting into the environment. You're getting the brightness, but you're not in 100-degree weather come June or July. So very, very important as far as having that circulation and that movement. Do you really need 5 fans? No. No. What you need is fresh air. So the way that fresh air typically comes to a lot of our gardens, if not piped in from another room or from outside the house as an intake, then it's typically from one room to the next, you know, from the basement into the room that they're in the basement, by having that door cracked. Simply by having a fan, like this pedestal fan, in a room, it creates a draw from the rest of the house to that. You know, so where's an example that we've seen other than the garden? So if you're cooking in the morning in the kitchen and you've got the ceiling fan on the bedroom, by the time you're done cooking breakfast, the bedroom's going to smell like bacon because it has that ambient draw caused by the circulation of that fan. As far as the stomata, we definitely want to touch on that. Your stomata you want to keep clean. I was talking to Mr. Banks here, and he's foliar feeding stuff to his plants, spraying the leaves, and that's a very good way to deliver nutrients to the plants in a pinch, because the absorption is so much faster than if you water it in and wait for it to do its job. The downside is, if you're treating, say, for insects, or you're foliar feeding often, those stomata can get clogged and dirty. And again, it would cause a closing of that stomata, effectively stifling the breathing of that leaf or of that entire plant. So if you've sprayed for bugs, typical fare is to go 1 week later, spray with clean water, wipe it off with a cloth, something of that nature, just to ensure, just like a filter for the car, an air filter, to ensure that the breathing is happening.
Wipe it off with a cloth.
Well, it just depends. With what you sprayed, you didn't use anything oil-based, you used mineral-based, so it's not going to create a very large residue. But if you were spraying for bugs, typically all of your insecticides, whether organic or inorganic, are oil-based, and so you start to see a buildup and a residue actually on the leaves that you would want to remove to ensure that they're growing properly.
What's a good way to clean the leaf?
You know, it just depends on what plant you're dealing with, but typically spraying clean water on the plants with the lights diminished always. We never spray with the lights all the way up. And then again, wiping with a cloth. You could go in there with something as simple as a cotton t-shirt or cotton baby diaper, something of that nature.
And just kind of...
Yeah, if this represents your leaf, you're just like that. Keeping in mind that the primary percentage of your stomata or stoma are on the underside of the leaves. So when we spray the bottoms, because that's where it's all going to get in. When we clean the bottoms, because that's the main breathing point, the entry point. Some circulation and ventilation strategies that I kind of wanted to touch on. People ask me, Ted, well, you know, do I need my fans on at night? Do I need them on all the time? Should I have them on a timer? So typically, if you're cooling your light system with a plumbed reflector, then that will definitely run the entire time that the lights are on. I typically recommend a 1 hour overlap, which means that if the lights are on from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., that the fan that cools the lights will be on from 5 a.m. till 7 p.m. That way I know that they're starting at a cooler point, so they're cooler throughout the day. I have a lower daytime high, and I know that they've properly evacuated all the heat because they ran for an extra hour after the lights turned off. Definitely sucked all the heat out of that room. So that's a very effective use of fans as far as your lighting is concerned. Your mover fans, I typically recommend that they're extinguished during the nighttime. Again, when you're blowing across plants, you can make the stomas close, and especially at night, they're not having photosynthesis, they're not absorbing gases, they're purging gases. So to have too much wind at night, it stifles that exhaust of unused gases. It could be CO2, primarily it's oxygen, you know what I mean? And again, this is evidence when we've all gone in our gardens first thing in the morning and the lights have just come up and all of the plants are exhibiting a very vigor looking stature. They look like Nixon with his arms in the air. And that's typically because The plants store unused carbon dioxide with the oxygen, and when they purge at night, they spit it all out, but it's just right around them. So as soon as the lights come back up, they suck just the good gas, and they're very excited about it. And that's the typical reason why you see morning vigor in the gardens. For the intake and exhaust of the room, those fans, again, follow the photo period. While the lights are off, there's not a bunch of heat building up, so you don't need to exhaust it. They're not actively using fresh air, so you don't so much need to pressurize the room with an intake of fresh air. So typically everything is extinguished at night with the save of the lights. You know, their fan runs a little bit into the dark, but then turns off eventually. So, you know, less is more. We don't need to be burning that electricity anyway. You know what I mean? It's not going to actually help our product. Another thing I want to touch is where your fans should be within the garden and when we should use them during the day. So during the day, my mover fans are going to be on 24/7. No matter what happens, I'm blowing all the branches, keeping all that heat stirred up in there, ensuring that heat is rising because I'm pushing it away, so it's naturally using the physics of heat to rise and exhaust out of the room or go into the subfloor above it. And I really want to just keep things moving. Wind resistance when gardening indoors is very key. Outside, the wind blows, trees are tougher, they don't lose a branch if it's covered with apples. Indoors, without wind, the fruit could actually break the boughs of the plant. So by blowing on it, every time that branch goes like this and comes back to its normal position, it's a little bit hardier and a little bit tougher than it was before, which ultimately allows it to support more weight of production. I did bring in a few fans here for us to take a look at. So let's see, let me grab this chair. Let's see. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Alright, does anybody know what this appliance is called? These are squirrel cage fans. They're typically evidenced by this seashell shape. They intake through the side and exhaust out the front like this. These are most commonly seen on the tops of office buildings, warehouse buildings in a much larger fashion, but to run the big air conditioners and whatnot and force it down into the building. Squirrel cage fans are basically the first fan that we had for exchanging the room air. They are very handy in the effect that they're very powerful. The air from them is rated in cubic feet per minute, or CFMs. So this is actually a 465 CFM fan, which is quite a bit of air movement from such a small appliance. Also, monetarily, this is very close to $100. So, while $100 is a lot of money in this economy, this is actually a thriftier fan than some of the other ones that you'll see. I really like these because they're maintenanceable. You can see the little squirrel cage spinning in there. After many, many years of running non-stop, you may eventually hear a rubbing sound, and they're adjustable in the effect that I can reach in here with an Allen, loosen up this cage, recenter it, tighten it, and I'm good to go for another 10 years. These fans typically do not fail. You know, after many, many years of use, they typically do not fail. So that is a squirrel cage fan. You could plumb it with the intake to a reflector or to a 4-inch tube that's providing fresh air or an exhaust from your room. You could also get an adapter. You see there's screw holes here that would make this square into a circle, so then you could then force it through any number of orifices that are around as well. This is a very good fan, and I want to plug it in for you guys just so you can see how powerful it is, and hopefully it won't jump out of my hands as I do so. Let's see. So, not too bad. Provides a pretty good throw of air and not very loud, which I really like. So, squirrel cage fans are always a very good bet for you guys. And then the next fan that I want to display is a wall mount fan. Now, a wall mount fan typically screws into the wall, and the purpose of that is to get it out of our way, so I'm not tripping all over it like I would our friend with the pedestal here. These typically provide a 90-degree movement, which means that it will go from side to side, but also in the middle, it goes up and down like a U, so that I'm getting the floor and the tops. the tops and the floor. These are very good. This is probably, let's see, this is an Air King. This is a 18-inch. It's about a $75 fan right here. Pretty good investment. Plugs right in. Typically, these type of fans are grounded, which I always recommend to you guys to use grounded products because it's an extreme environment. One of these in the corner of the room helps circulate the air, helps keep the heat moving. Very, very handy. I really recommend these pretty highly. We sell probably 6 different kinds of this product in our store. Now this one, I still like it. And it does have some pros and cons over the wall. Oh, that's a pleasant sound. So, I'll tell you why I like this one. Wall mount fans, being elevated and off the ground, so that's pretty powerful, typically have plastic blades and plastic gearing. And what that means is that as it blows, they flex, which means it doesn't push to its full extent. With a pedestal fan, you typically have metal blades, which even though it's the same diameter, pushes a great deal more air. Also, these, for our environment, are typically weighted. That pedestal base right there is at least 45 pounds. And that's so when I'm walking through with my buckets full of water, I'm not going to knock it over and break my expensive appliance that I paid for. Not that these are that bad. These are typically under $100 too. This is right around $89. What I'm looking for is oscillation, strength of movement, and that it has a grounded plug. Let's see, I'll fire this up on low. That was on low and brief. Suck it back a little bit. There we go. You can tell on low that this is quite a powerful fan. This is a 3-speed. This is the lowest of all the speeds. So, really, really like these. There we go. A little excited there, guys, as all the tests fly across the room. So, but moving right along, these are typically your circulation fans, which you would put in the